The annual Perth School Rankings were released recently by the School Curriculum and Standards Authority.
The rationale behind publication of the tables is to recognise excellent and high achievement in Stage 3 WACE courses, and also the VET completions of certificates by students in schools. The authority has a responsibility to actually ensure that the publication of this information is accurate and it's provided in a manner so that it's not able to be misrepresented.
The rankings are based on Stage 3 WACE courses where students achieved 75% or above.
Well, I think they're the two areas that we look at when we think about students heading towards pathways which may be towards employment, further training or university. So when we look at the WACE course score, we think about those students that are heading towards university, and when we think about those students going to employment, we often think about students leaving schools with some qualification. These tables are of interest to parents, caregivers and the community because they provide a snapshot of the performance of students as they move through their educational career into employment opportunities, further training at TAFE, and also going on to university.
Public schools did well on the 2015 list, with Willetton, Churchlands and Rossmoyne taking out the 15th, 16th and 17th spots respectively. However, private education continued to excel, with the top 10 spots consisting only of private schools.
Private schools tend to excel in the rankings in the paper, particularly those in the metropolitan area, because they actually come from a higher socio-economic demographic, and that really is the major determinant of success. Private schools tend to have better facilities, smaller classes, etc. However, I'm not sure that that's actually correct, as the government school system now is really replicating many of the things that are happening in the non-government school sector. And the money they're actually spending on the facilities now are quite extensive. So I think they've learned from the non-government school sector what parents are expecting. And it really isn't the facilities. In the end, what they will have to replicate is the care and the values that these schools actually represent and wish their children, or the parents wish their children to embrace. I think the rankings are overrated. The data that the rankings come from is very good data to improve learning outcomes for students, but it's how they're used is what makes a difference. And they should be used within the school with the teachers to actually know their students better and look for where they can help them to improve. To take the data as newspapers and the media does to try and rank schools is really quite misleading, because quite often the most successful schools are the lower SES schools who have actually added value over and above their weight. So it doesn't give a true picture, I don't believe, the rankings. What it does show, and consistently shows, that if you're at a high SES school or where students come from high socioeconomic areas, they will tend to do better. And this has been exacerbated by the state government, which now has the only academic selective school in the state where people where they have to actually pass exams to get into the school. And all that does is bring together a homogeneous lot of students, and that's not replicating society, and I don't think it's necessarily a good educational model.
The authority believes that this is one piece of information that parents can use in analysing what are the best needs for their child as they move through compulsory education. I know from work that I have undertaken with schools that schools look at this data and information and reflect on their own performances and their teaching and learning practices at the school level.
Parents can use statistics best by actually talking to their schools and asking principals and their teachers, what does that mean for their child? Because that's really what it is about. And certainly the NAPLAN testing, which is not what TE or the tertiary results are all about in the rankings. But the NAPLAN testing is good information for parents and for teachers to actually get their heads around and see how their child is actually progressing.
I think that the first 50 tables are what they are, a snapshot of Year 12 performance at a given point in time. That's what they are. For most schools, education is about the whole student. It's not just about one aspect in the development of that student. And so I think that needs to be considered by parents when they're looking at schools for their own children. There are lots of programs, many programs that schools are currently running, which are building on, the full development of a rounded individual, so that when they leave school, they're equipped for everyday life.
Using the rankings to a limited extent is quite natural for parents to do, but it shouldn't be the be-all and end-all in terms of a school for your child. And certainly, if you're choosing it on the rankings for educational or status advantage, I think that's a wrong choice. You should be looking at your child, seeing what the child needs, and whether it's a homogeneous education where they want the competition like at the selective schools in a government school, or whether it's about sport, but they should be choosing where they know their child will succeed, get success, and a sound values-based education. I think there's only two real key aspects of any school. One is sound teaching, good teachers, and good leadership. And if you have that, children will succeed. That's what I'd be looking at, as a caring, supportive environment where there's good sound teaching and leadership that allows teachers to actually look at the individual child and address their needs.
While the rankings can provide some measure of student achievement, parents, schools and communities should be wary about using rankings alone as a guide for student achievement. This has been Tega Faka reporting for Undercurrent.